Hi, everyone. Welcome to this segment of Black Spring with Autumn. And I'm very happy to have everyone here on this segment. And today I have a insightful and very experienced panel for the topic of the First Amendment, as well as something that I find to be a new concept, technocracy. And of course, by now, you may have heard of censorship across social media platforms, or you may have even heard of others who may have been denied a fundamental right to peaceably assemble during the pandemic. And today we're going to learn, I think, many things, as well as being informed and ways that we can be active in times in which our liberties are under siege. So, with that, I would like to introduce Mary Baker. She is a political activist, a trainer, and she's an author of the book. She is the author of Citizen Ninja. Also, I'd like to introduce Patrick Wood. He is the executive director and founder of Citizens for Free Speech. Patrick is also a leading and critical expert on sustainable development, green economy, Agenda 21 and 2030 agenda, as well as historic technocracy. I'd like to welcome you both to Black Spring. And I just want to start off by saying to Mary that I am a huge fan of the book Citizen Ninja and just the foundational perspective that it offers. So I'd like to welcome you both. And if you could start off maybe with telling us how you guys individually became active and what your current focus is. So can we start with Mary?
Okay. Hey, Autumn. It's really great to be here. So I became active probably back in 2009, and I just went to a public meeting and was shocked by the bully techniques that were being used to shut down people's opinions. We were asked to come and give public comment, feedback on a project in the city, and anyone who wasn't seen as a team player, who wasn't seen as someone who agreed with the plan, was systematically shut down, told to sit down and shut up, basically. And I was so shocked by that. I went to other meetings to see if that's how they were conducted. And I found that though it wasn't as bad, it still was pretty unbelievable. And so I just engaged and realized that we needed to teach people how to engage effectively and how to have civil political discourse with people, and how to be an influence and derive change, positive change that way, with competing positive values versus coercion and bully tactics. So that's how I got involved. I kind of woke up and saw what was going on and tried to give some input as to how it could be done better.
Thank you. Patrick?
Well, I ran into Mary a few years ago for doing this very thing, and I'm kind of a big picture guy. I'm not a detail person. Mary really gets the details of all this. She's a great trainer, and she really knows how to express herself and the ideas. I got involved with creating CFFS, Citizens for Free Speech, a few years ago because I saw the collusion that was taking place with big tech media, the big social media giants. We'd seen individual censorship for some time, a little here, a little there, not just conservative, but other issues as well. And we noticed that. But when the social media gang started pounding on individuals simultaneously, it became really obvious that something bigger was going on. For instance, Twitter would ban somebody, then Facebook would ban them, then Google would disappear them, or some other platform. And this, you can't prove collusion, right? Because who has a camera that went in the back room and filmed these people doing that? But you see the results of it, and it's pretty obvious that something big is going on. That sent off alarm bells in my mind like crazy. And I knew if this would start a trend, and it did, and here we are today, today censorship is rampant across all platforms, across all means of communication, doesn't matter what it is now. And it's also trickled down into society where the big thing to do now is to publicly shame people. If you don't like what they're saying, start calling them names and swearing at them and, using the foul language and epithets, whatever people could dream up to make them look stupid, to make them look, ignorant. And basically, I don't want to talk to you. So that's what got me involved originally. And I ran into Mary early on because I very strongly believed in local activism, that was the only way to counter this. It wasn't national activism. It wasn't regional activism. It's local activism in your own communities. And that's when I ran across Mary. And Mary had the nuts and bolts of what I was looking for sure. How do we reestablish effective communications with people who may agree with us or may not agree with us? And there's a lot of those around today, right? And how do you talk to somebody, calm them down without insulting them? Some people you talk to, you want to tell them, you can't do this, but you want to tell them somebody needs a hug today. or you want to tell them, look, sit down and take a deep breath and just listen to me for a minute. I'm not attacking you. I just want to talk to you. Well, communications is broken down on so many levels across the country. We need to build it back up. We need to recreate what the founders of our Constitution had for us in the first place. That was the First Amendment. The First Amendment, as you originally mentioned, is five different elements in it. We'll talk about them perhaps. But all five of the elements in the First Amendment have to do with communication. Every one of them. Freedom of expression of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, that's writing. The right to assemble peaceably. Well, what do you do when you assemble? You talk, you listen. And the right to redress the government for grievances. That's partly what this whole modern protest is about right now. Nobody's listening to us. And that's not just a Black issue either, by the way. The government hasn't listened to us for a long time. And so that's a form of communication that's been shut down. So anyway, that's kind of where I'm coming from in this. It does seem like an odd hop to come from studying globalization and technocracy and stuff like that to, into Citizens for Free Speech. But from my perspective, it was a natural way to go. And people would ask me all the time, what can we do? What can we do? And this is what people can do. They need to learn how to communicate again. And we need to create statesmen in our country, not big time statesmen, but just people on the street. We need to create people who can model the correct form of communication and actually get things done and break through the ice barriers to get to the other side, to get the dialogue started.
Thank you so much. Thank you both so much. So if you don't mind, I'd like to go back to Mary and to maybe kind of open up with the First Amendment, if you don't mind. If you could just start out with just giving us the fundamentals, the foundation of the First Amendment.
Well, as the way it pertains to your activism, government has to conduct its business before the people. There has to be transparency, and there has to be a way for people to be able to talk to government. And there are rules around that. And so civic knowledge is important. It's important that you know how to address a city council or a board of supervisors or a school board. So there are rules around that, but the rules have to be based on transparency. There's sunshine laws in all the states have sunshine laws written into their constitution. So it's important at the local level, which is what I focus on, for the citizen to be able to speak to their local officials and to observe the business of the city in front of them, whether it's in person or whether it's through media. So live streaming, or, to be able to go back and watch the recorded version of the meeting. So you have to be able to give public comment. And there are rules around public comment, and you have to know what those are, those rules of engagement. So civic knowledge is super important. So that's the first thing, is business and being able to participate it and give public comment back. The second is to be able to have access to your elected officials. And I'm a firm believer in developing relationships and thinking of yourself as a partner with your local public servant, whether they are elected or non-elected, whether they're a staff member or they're an appointed member or they're elected. You have to be able to communicate with them one-on-one. So having access to that is also important. And then you have to, if you disagree with the decisions that are being made, you have to be able to pull a group of people together and write, put a campaign together, a letter writing campaign together, emails. You can use the newspaper to do that, to publicly share your opinion about something through an op-ed letter or a letter to the editor, or just a podcast, just like what we're doing now, being able to express yourself. And to peacefully assemble as a group to demonstrate, to protest. These are all different types, of goals. These types of gatherings can have different intents. Maybe one is to demonstrate, or one is to protest, or one is to rally. And of course, I would never support one to riot, because the communication breakdown happens there. And of course, you need to be able to redress your grievances. So if you have a problem, if you've been wrongfully fined, for example, or there's a property rights issue, you have to be able to go back to the government and redress those grievances. So they have to be held accountable. So that's just, I guess, what I would share as an introduction to proper communication. But what we don't think about, and I'm just going to throw this last one in, is we have these different methods of engagement, whether it's civic or electoral, because we, of course, can communicate through our vote, or it's political. Those are some of the examples I've given. It's also social. So we have to be able to, as Patrick was mentioning, be able to share ideas and talk to one another and listen. And in my book, in the training, I teach you different ways of how to do that, because the social realm is often even scarier than the public square realm, believe it or not. So that's what I would share to start off.
Great. Well, thanks so much for that. And what I also want to talk about is, of course, when it comes to I want to go just a bit to the social media aspect of this. Is there a way, in terms of activism is what I'm asking, is there a way that we can, is there a way to address or redress the government based on the amount of censorship that's going on? Is that something that should start maybe not so much locally? Should it start with writing to, say, a YouTube or a Facebook, when they say, oh, you've violated a community standard? I mean, is that where, would you suggest that we write directly to them? Is that when you talk about local, is that as local as we can start? How local can we be if we want to maybe redress our grievances from the source before we reach like a federal kind of level, or appearing, like I've seen some appearances on Capitol Hill from content creators? Does that make sense at all?
Well, so you have to definitely separate. Your freedom of speech is a constitutional right, and so that is saying that the government cannot shut down your ability to express yourself. That is, they can't do that. But a private enterprise, like Facebook, for example, social media, they can set up their own guidelines and their own terms of service. Just very similar to those next door apps that people are communicating with each other through these next door apps. I mean, that's super local, right? That's by neighborhood. And it turned out, actually, I'm a moderator in one of those. I didn't realize I had just set it up. And then the next thing I know, I'm being asked to shut down certain posts. Why me? Oh, it turns out you're the moderator for your neighborhood. And that's been an interesting experience, actually, because that is that local level where people are talking to one another. They're using that a social app to communicate with one another. And of course, there are community guidelines, right? But they are allowed to set those. That's not a government entity, right? So they're allowed to set those, and they have their moderators or their rules written in to their software that says, if you say these things or if you promote XYZ, we will remove that comment, or we will shut that down. And that is their prerogative to do that. So there has to be a distinction between the two. Now, unfortunately, the consequence of that is a shutting down of communication and expression. And how can we advance our ideas if we can't talk to one another? And so these social apps are a real problem, and it does reduce our freedom of expression, but that is not necessarily protected under the Constitution, because those are non-governmental entities. They're private enterprises that can set their own community guidelines. So does that answer your question?
I think so. I will say, for instance, I've had a few things that have been shut down or removed, and sometimes I'm really unclear. They make it down to like, oh, well, it's this 10 seconds that we need you to either remove, or, I'm not even sure at times, like, how do I appeal this when it's such, is it because it has someone else's logo in the background, or it just gets to be, I just think some of it gets to be a little bit more petty as it goes on. And before I know it, I have to take the whole thing down, because now the video or the content makes no sense if I remove that 10 seconds.
Well, what I would say from a citizen ninja standpoint, so different from, you got the regular activism, and then you got the citizen ninja, is a little bit more strategic and stealthy. So what I would propose is that you find a way to communicate what you want to communicate without falling into the pit that gets you shadow banned or censored in some way or edited out. And there are ways to do that. People are getting very clever. There's this one, he's like a comedian. He has red hair. I don't know his name, but everything he does is sarcastic. So he says everything that would be allowed to be said to have the position that would be allowed, but then he's sarcastic about it. So it's the opposite. So that's super clever way to do it if you have the skill to be comedic like that. But yeah, so you have to choose your language carefully, because unless you have a ton of dough, and not even a ton, at least if you have the power to sue, and to force change in the legal system, that would be a way to do it. I know Dennis Prager's been trying to do that with his, but maybe Patrick, you have a thought about that.
I should probably comment on this at this point, that this idea that corporations like a Facebook, like a Twitter, have the same rights as a citizen is wrong. They're not citizens. They employ people who might be citizens. In a lot of cases, they're not. They're from other countries. But corporation is not a citizen. The Constitution of our country was made for the people of our country, for you and me and Mary. And those that kind of hide behind this business, well, it's our right to free speech to do whatever we want to do. This is cracked. But the problem is, everybody that has sued Facebook and Twitter and so on this business of discrimination and kind of the First Amendment loosely, every case has been lost, including Dennis Prager. Dennis Prager launched a very big lawsuit, and he The court threw it out. So the legal system has not been effective at doing anything to tamp down what the social media giants are doing. So this has become a very thorny legal question now. But what's the bigger picture? What's happening when you see especially the collusion between these media giants? You see a larger agenda after you watch them and see what they're censoring and see why they're censoring, what they're saying. A larger picture starts to emerge that these companies are intending to change the form of government in the United States. Google now this has been made very clear with Google that they intend to manipulate, if not throw, the 2020 election coming up this fall. That's just a boast on one hand. They say they're going to do it. Whether they can pull it off is another story. Some people say, experts even say, absolutely yes, this is the most dangerous thing we've ever faced. But the larger picture, when you take all of these companies together and see what they're trying to do to manipulate our political system for their own ends, this starts to cross over into an area of law, U.S. statute, known as sedition. That is promoting the active overthrow or actively promoting the overthrow of a government structure. And that doesn't mean, I'm not saying that, oh, I really love the government or I like it. I don't. But that's not my point. My point is, these people are unelected. They're unaccountable to anybody. Nobody said that it was okay for them just to go do this. They decided to do this all by themselves. And this is not the American way. This has never been the American way. This is not what the Constitution provides for us. So in a very large way, these social media giants are operating outside of the law, even while they're hiding behind the law to do these things to us. And it's very complicated, as you can see. I don't want to go into it any further, but it's a sticky wicket, as they say in England. It's, it can't be answered easily, but it is a big problem in society today. And unfortunately, so many people that have bombed out of the Facebook anyway and Twitter, I hear this comment for years. It's, Twitter is a cesspool, they say, and Facebook is a cesspool, and you just get unending arguments with people, and you get trolls coming in and breaking all the conversation up and stuff. There's lots of problems, but the biggest issue is, in my mind, corporations are not people. They are not citizens, period. And they should not be treated as citizens. And so if somebody suggests, well, maybe the government should do something to regulate these companies, that's fully in line with American government for at least the last 150 years. That's exactly what's happened. When companies rise up to be the level of a utility where they have a major impact on society, they're held to another standard, and they're held to, government oversight, if you will, that is fair to all people in the country, not just a few chosen ones, but all the people. That makes sense?
Yes. It sounds like it does sound pretty. There's a lot of layers there, and a lot of I don't know. As I say, nuance. A lot of vulnerabilities there. So what I'll do is I'll go on to, can you, for back to Patrick, could you just tell us what is technocracy? Can you just tell us what is it? Can you tell us that by definition, or I'm thinking when I hear that word, I'm trying to put it into either is this a discipline that I'll find on a campus, or is it something that's already being studied, or is it an infrastructure that's in place that the groundwork has been laid for, and that we're all just kind of at the mercy of the strings? I'm not sure if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. First off, I'm glad you have heard of technocracy at all, because so many people go, "What would you say?"
I like technology.
Let me say first off, not anti-technology any way, shape, or form. I got my career, most of my career was in technology, so I'm not against it. But technocracy was a movement started back in the 1930s that decided during the heat of the Great Depression that they were going to create a new economic system. So scientists and engineers at Columbia University got together with some other people outside, and they decided that they would architect an economic system from scratch. And they did. And it kind of made a wave back then, but by the end of the 1930s and in the 40s, when World War II was really, when we got in, especially to World War II, the economy recovered and technocracy kind of fell by the wayside. People lost interest, but it was a huge deal for quite a while. It lay dormant for several years until it was picked up by a group of global elitists back in the early 1970s. They, in turn, fed it to the United Nations, and they changed the name. This is just a marketing change. It wasn't a change of substance. It was just changed the name to make it easy to market. And they called it sustainable development. That's something everybody understands today. Everybody's heard the word sustainability and sustainable development, green economy, Green New Deal, those sorts of terms all refer to sustainable development, which in fact is historic technocracy. It is antithetical to capitalism and free enterprise, or the free market economy. It would completely destroy it. It would take over all of the management of resources around the world, to allocate them out to manufacturers and makers, whoever, people that make things. And they would also control the consumption of those products that were made by people like you and me. So we would have certain things that boundaries that we could stay within, we'd be okay. But if we stepped over too much, we'd get slapped, and you can't do that anymore. So first off, technocracy was an economic system, and it still is an economic system. The United Nations has taken it to the whole planet. And the way they did it, in America, it's seen in every single community in our country, every county, every city, every town, every little settlement. You see signs of sustainable development. Here's how it got here. Their motto was think global, act local. They said that all over the literature. Think global, act local. So, okay, let's act local. So they went down to the little communities and big communities, and they started to infiltrate, get these policies embedded in these various political entities. And now, even though they say, well, we didn't force anybody to do this, it was all voluntary. Well, yeah, it was in a way, but don't hide behind that voluntary stuff. If you didn't do it, you would be on the outs with everybody that was trying to do it to you. So this is where technocracy came from, and this is what it looks like today. It's a complete management of all the resources in the world. And by the way, they wanted to get rid of private property back in the 30s, and they still do. Private property is not in the picture of our future if these people are successful. That means people like you and I, I don't know, let's say if you fell into $1 million somehow, and you thought, I'm going to go out and buy myself a nice little ranch out somewhere, and piece of property with a house on it. I'm going to live on it and have a great old time. That wouldn't fly in technocracy, because there is the concept of private property just doesn't exist. You will live at their instance, and they will give you what you need and nothing more and nothing less. And you have to trust them to decide what's best for you. And that might fly in Europe. It might fly in Africa. I don't know, but it won't fly in the United States. That's, we love our private property, and that comes from the Constitution. And we value that. Without private property, really, our country would just be gone.
Well, and Autumn, it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning about these meetings. It's why when you go to these public workshop meetings where they're trying to roll out some of these concepts, sustainable development concepts, why they shut down the people, because the people actually really wouldn't agree with it. And so what they do is they force and nudge an agenda, and they do it behind the scenes. They don't include the citizens. And then when they bring the whole package deal, the whole plan out to the citizens, because they have to by law, then they have to nudge and bully the people to agree, so that they will have basically the consensus, the false consensus, to be able to roll out these plans and for city council to vote on them. This is why it's so important that citizens engage at the local level and understand what's going on. But I mean, if we want to just for a minute, just blow this out to what's going on today with pandemic and with the Black Lives Matter and the Antifa groups, these people, all citizens need to engage at the local level to stop things like unions that allow these bad cops to continue working, right? They need to be able to stop the abortion clinics, for example, that are just infiltrating all of the cities and touching all the poor people and the poverty, urban planning, housing, private property, education. I mean, even the tariff levies and trade barriers, all of these things are leading us down these paths of technocracy, which if people were engaged at the local level and working in partnership with the public servants, maybe actually the people would be in control and not the elected officials who were just completely blind and deaf to what people are asking from them, because there's so much pain and suffering going on.
Some people think it's impossible to make change on a city level or county level, but on the same basis of think global, act local, there was an activist in California, a citizen activist, who went to a town council. Actually, it wasn't just him, there was a few of them, and went to a town council and educated the councilors on Agenda 21. That was one of the original sustainable development programs that came out of the United Nations back in 1992. And they went to the city council and they educated them on what was going on with this plan, what it meant for property rights, what it meant for constitutional rights in general. And the city council unanimously decided to throw Agenda 21 out of the city. They throw it out. They wrote a resolution, a binding resolution, that forbade any implementation of anything that Agenda 21 had to do. Boom, it's gone. And this can happen. Most citizens are convinced that this can't happen, but I'll give you another example. When Walmart or Costco goes into a small town and they say, we'd like to come in and build a nice little store in your community. And, you're going to love it because you get, cheap prices, this, that, and the other. And the town council sits there and thinks, we only got 10,000 people in our town, and 2,000 of those have small businesses on Main Street and little plants, whatever, they're making things, whatever. And if this big box store comes into our town, it's going to destroy our local business people. Now, this has been played out across America. So the city council says to whatever the big store is, the Costco, the Walmart, take a hike. You ain't coming back here. And they send them packing. Say, no, we're not going to let you in. You're not going to come in and ruin our town. Get out of here. We like our town the way it is. And they leave. They don't argue. They don't go to court. They don't make a big stink about it. They say, there's lots of other towns that will say yes to us. Let's go on down the road and get somebody else. But there have been dozens, if not hundreds, of little towns across America told these corporate entities to get lost. And they do get lost. That means that the city council was looking after the people of that community. That's great. I mean, you want to see that kind of protective, activity going on for the people. So there's great things that can be done on a local level. There have been great things done on a local level. It's just that you don't hear about it in the mainstream media. And guess why? They don't want you to know that, because if every American knew what was happening over here that was successful, you'd be doing the same thing over there successfully, and they would be flat out of luck. So they don't let that narrative rise to the surface at all.
Well, and it's really governance by, it's not Technocracy is not governance by elected officials. It's governance by experts and non-elected people and bureaucrats. And the people don't have power. It's very difficult for people to have power over that because they can't unelect them. And so it's very important for people to show up, to express, their outrage, to find the problems, to partner with their elected officials, to replace them if they're not listening to what the citizens want, in order to affect positive change, right? It's the people who have the power. They just see those entities as dominant power, but actually it's the people who have the power. And they need to see themselves that way, that they can execute positive change even amongst competing positive values, because not everyone agrees, but we can find a way forward if we work together, not if we're told what to do or bullied into it.
Yes, I can see that. So, I mean, you talked about a lot of things, but I mean, like specifically when we talk about, say, for instance, if you were to go to a city council meeting, and I know just like on a local level, I've gone to a couple of meetings where they say, oh, well, it'll be maybe like a parent that says, or someone that doesn't have any kids will say, well, say, for instance, drag queen story time is what we're having an issue with, but we don't have enough parents to go down. We don't have enough people to show up at the meetings. Is this the type of activism, or the type of, I guess, reigning of power, or more, we can have an effect on that kind of a level when it comes to these, being more active? Or
it's your town and you have outside actors coming in to try to foment change that is not about the values of your town. And so the people need to not be bullied into accepting new values, or values that are you're being nudged, to accept through propaganda, through different types of regulations, different compliance laws, things like that. And guidelines, like we started with community guidelines. So these outside actors are changing the values of our towns, right? Your town, each person chooses to live in a town or a city because, maybe it's where their job is, or it's the city that they grew up in, or it's where they want to be, whatever the reason, they're living where they are living. Sometimes you have choice, sometimes you don't, but it's important for the people to say, hey, this is our town, this is our city, and you outside actors are trying to change things. A lot of nonprofits will come in and do public-private partnerships where you get corporations, government agencies, and nonprofits who come together to make plans that the people didn't even ask for. And the next thing you know, they're shutting down your park, or they're taking away your parking, or they're telling you that you have to live in this urban dense area. They start changing the first ring suburbs around the cities. I mean, it just, the list goes on, and the people didn't even ask for it. And then in order for them to approve the plans, they bully people to a false consensus. I mean, this has got to stop. And the way it stops is for people to check their values, see what it is that they believe in, and speak up in a way that is influencing and not coercing, because that's what they're doing to you. So I don't always recommend that you're coercing back. That doesn't lead to civil political discourse and change.
The narrative that needs to be stopped is these outside people pretending that they have our best interest at heart when they clearly don't. But a good salesman, what's a good salesman going to say? A good salesman is going to say anything that you'll hear, that you'll believe, just to get the order. Nothing else matters. They'll lie to you, they'll cheat, they'll steal, whatever. It doesn't matter. A good salesman, well, not a crooked salesman, will say anything to you that you will receive in order to get you to do what they want you to do. And this is the kind of sales tactics that's been used. We see this top to bottom in society. Imagine what would happen if some president could get elected and put up a barbed wire fence around Washington, D.C. and say no lobbyist is allowed to come into this Capitol Hill. Nobody, no lobbyist in here. And then tell all the legislators in the Capitol, no bill gets introduced unless you personally write it. No lobbyist allowed. Can you imagine the stink that would create? Yeah. Well, you see, people come in to states. We have people coming into Arizona from outside trying to get certain things done. We have people coming into cities trying to do that. You have people coming in to protest even that, you know, they're not there to be with the people. They're there to use the people to further their own agenda. So we see these outsiders coming in. Every time, I can make a generalization here, I think. Almost every time that some outsider group comes into anything going on, just kind of on a local basis, the people that are doing whatever they're doing resent that outside influence. Just by knee-jerk reaction, they resent outsiders coming in and telling them what to do. It's like, hey, this is our city. This is our town. This is our state. What do you know about this? You don't live here. We live here. We suffer the consequences of what you're telling us. We could take care of ourselves just fine. Thank you. We don't need you. So get out. That's what, you know, that's kind of what's in the American heart, in my mind, top to bottom, because we see this kind of intrusion everywhere you look.
And on different topics, all different topics, you know. I mean, any topic, it's happening on any topic. I would say Patrick had me speak to a group of people, some of his connections with Citizens for Free Speech about during the time of the pandemic, you know, when it was at its height and kind of we were coming out of it and the numbers were coming down. And yet we were still being told we had to wear masks. We're still being told that, you know, we had to do all these things. And yet the numbers were coming down, and in certain areas were more, there were more hotspots in certain areas than others. And yet there was sort of like this one size fits all plan that didn't make any sense. And so my main talking point about that, and I would say this would cover anything, it's don't play the role and speak the script that they're telling you to play and to speak. No. You know, be the citizen role model that you want to be. Don't be the one that they're telling you to be. And don't read from their script. You know, be true to yourself and have an organic movement, not one that's been co-opted and taken over. Regardless of what the issue is, don't play the role that they want you to play. Be your own citizen role model. And to me, if I wanted to express what that is a person, it's in the book, that is a person who has civic knowledge, who understands the parameters and the rules of engagement, basically. It's self-restraint. It's not just being emotional and diving in, you know, it's responding thoughtfully to something, right? Listening instead of just talking, just blabbing out, you know, whatever it is you think, you know, and it's self-assertion, you know, it's not waiting for somebody else to do it. It's you doing it, right? You making the effort. And then finally, it's self-reliance, right? So again, you doing the effort and asserting yourself and speaking, right? Not allowing others to speak on your behalf or giving you the script and the talking points that you're just repeating without thinking about what it is you're saying. So I would say stop playing that role, you know, and think about what your values are and what you believe in. Don't bow down to someone else bullying you into something. And of course, the book teaches you, you know, how to do this, because it's, you know, it's like, how do you start, you know, and there's so much emotion involved. Right. But so that's what I would say, you know, with all of this, pay attention, you know, and don't let someone tell you what you have to, who you have to be, and what you have to say. No.
Well, I just want go ahead, Patrick.
I was going to say, this is a very important part of free speech. If anybody convinces you or tricks you into not saying something you really want to say, that's suppression of your free speech right there. And it happens all the time. And so people start choosing their words. Who knows? I mean, how many people have gotten fired from their jobs, important people, for saying some little word that triggered somebody. And all of a sudden, oh, that person is bad, bad, bad. You got to fire him. And their career gets completely destroyed over saying some word. Well, never that word again, will they? This is absolutely ludicrous in America, that people can effectively shut down a whole segment of society to get them to speak the way they want them to speak or not speak by being silent. That's a gross violation of the First Amendment. It really is. This is the heartbeat of free speech, that you can say what's on your mind without being attacked for it.
Okay, well, let me just go ahead, Mary. Go ahead.
It's just, I mean, that's the social component, right? And what bothers me right now is that the people are speaking and the elected officials are not listening. They've been speaking for a long time, and elected officials have not been listening. Now, why haven't, groups gone and replaced those people that don't listen? Why they haven't gone after certain non-governmental agencies who are fomenting further suffering, for example, and unfair treatment. I don't know. And I can't, speak to that. But so I think there's two things. Like I said in the beginning, there's the government's the Constitution requires them to allow free speech. And then there's the social aspect. Well, there's a corporation aspect that we talked about. And then there's the social aspect that we're saying. And everyone should be able to communicate with the other. It isn't communication when you shut somebody else down because you don't agree with them. It's just, we can't go in that direction, or we will never move forward.
Yes, well, I just wanted to, I mean, this is just my extraction or big picture from what both of you have shared. Is it seems like on the technocracy aspect, it seems like it could be anywhere. Technocracy, you could have it anywhere. Like, to me, I think when I think about NGOs, I think they influence a lot of things. And I think that's where some of the misrepresentation comes in. And I also think even like on some of the city's issues or local issues, I think that when no one shows up, I think that the NGOs seem to be more successful, and then the citizens get what they don't want. Or as they say, some people say they just kind of slid that right through. Well, we're under lockdowns, they're sliding all these things through. So
Yep, got to pay attention.
Mary told me a little truism some time ago, a few years, and it's true just about for any level of anything we're talking about here, is that if you don't have a seat at the table, you are what's on the menu for dinner. That's about it.
It's true. So if you don't want to be what's for dinner, get yourself a seat at that table. Seriously. And I've had to work hard sometimes to get a seat because I've been shut out as a citizen, and that's where developing your network, building relationships, and seeing yourself as a partner with the people you elect. That's the way you exert influence. That's how you get that seat at the table. You don't do it by, insulting people. You don't do it by throwing out conspiracy theories that you can't back up. You don't do it that way. You have to be credible, professional, and care. You have to care about your community. So you have to show up and you have to care. And even be part of different civic associations, right? So that you understand, you have a sense of what's going on in your community. Otherwise, you're what's for dinner. They basically are preparing the menu, and and then you have to deal with whatever it is that they're cooking up.
And you won't like it.
Right. Well, I will say, because I know we're coming up to almost an hour here on time, I would like to maybe give you guys the last word, or either also ask you to tell us where we can find you, because I really appreciate you guys for joining us on the Black Spring with Autumn show. And yeah, we'd love to know where we might go to find out more information, or how we can be more active, or what's to come, because I think this is a very chaotic election season, and I just think that we're all holding on in some ways.
Well, I'll start just by saying that I really recommend that you read the book, and you can get it on Kindle or on Amazon or Barnes and Noble. Get the book. You can read it real fast. It's not an academic book. It's meant to be quick, easy, full of stories, so that, it takes you maybe a couple of days, 2 to 4 days, depending on how much time you have to read it. And then you're out the door. Like, you know what to do. You have an idea. And then from there, you just practice and develop your skill and your style, and you choose what are your hot button issues. And then I give you sort of the tools on how to engage. And I just have to say, Autumn, is so proud of you with this podcast. This is a perfect example of citizen activism, is having the podcast, bringing people on, having discussions, sharing thoughts about things. I mean, you are a perfect example of what more people need to be doing. And you've chosen this format. Good, then that's awesome, and other people can choose other ways. So I would say that to get the book, and then I would point you to what Patrick is doing. I would point your audience to what Patrick is doing with Citizens for Free Speech.
Yeah. Excellent. And what about you, Patrick?
We have a special gift that we're sending to new members right now.
Wow.
I won't tell you what it is. I think I saw your site up today. You're going to get one. You'll see what it is. And then you can go, whoa, look at that. But we encourage people to go to citizensforfreespeech.org and become a member. There's no charge to become a member. All you're doing really is just you're putting your name on the line, saying, I stand with the concept of free speech and the First Amendment. And we're going to provide, over a period of time, we're going to provide training. We're going to provide insight and stuff on what people can do on a local basis, and how they can defend and support the First Amendment. If we lose it, if we lose the First Amendment and our ability to communicate, we've lost everything in America. That's the sad reality right now. When communication stops, that's when the fighting starts. It's always been the case throughout history. And anybody that's ever known anybody divorced, if you ask them, what happened to your marriage? Well, he stopped talking to me and we just couldn't communicate anymore. Or she froze me out and went to sleep in the other bedroom and I couldn't talk to her anymore. It's always the source of it is we stopped communicating. And at that point, everything got ugly, real ugly. And they started fighting. And then the knives came out and the marriage dissolves and away you go. This is the First Amendment is put in the Constitution in the Bill of Rights first for a reason. It is singularly the most important element of a constitutional republic to be able to communicate. That's why it was put in the first position. They could have put it anywhere. They put it in the first position. And I've had that confirmed by a constitutional lawyer, by the way. I'm a little curious about it. I researched it. They said, absolutely. That was in their mind. They wanted to be first. And sadly, the Second Amendment is second for a reason too. Not sadly, they have the right to keep on, bear arms, but it's sad that they thought what needs to be behind the First Amendment is the Second Amendment, because if you lose the first one, the fighting's going to start. We can't let that happen. We just can't let that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I just want to ask you this, Patrick. And I of course, I'm also wondering, do you have a book that you recommend on technocracy, or is there a book that you've written perhaps that I might look into that's maybe available that a couple of ways.
Absolutely. I've written 2 recent books on technocracy. One is called Technocracy Rising. The other one's called Technocracy, The Hard Road to World Order. Both of them are very current, very relevant, and give people everything they really need to know. Between the 2 books, everything they need to know. There's audio book on the second book, and there's Kindles available, Kindle versions as well. Website Technocracy News has a ton of information on technocracy, what it's all about, and what we might be able to do about it. Maybe that's a tough nut to crack right now, but these technocrats, somebody's going to ask you. I know. Well, technocrat anyway? How do I know what a technocrat is? The president gets up to give a speech about coronavirus. Who's always standing behind him? Little old Dr. Anthony Fauci and Dr. They're sitting there like this.
Yeah.
They're kind of looking down their nose, and they got their arms folded. And
I have seen that body language from him, like most of the time, unfortunately, I have to say.
They told him to say, or else he's going to be in big trouble. These are technocrats. Anthony Fauci has deep sixed our country's economic system with these crazy policies he came up with and promoted. And the World Health Organization was right behind him. They're full of these technocrats as well. They want to rule according to science, not politics, not the people system. Science says, you have to do what science says. And you see these people standing behind, like Fauci, standing behind every world leader right now. When they're in a press conference, you see these people behind, just like that, same thing, kind of looking down there. They're the ones that are giving the orders, not the politicians. This is the danger of technocracy right now. And I think people are starting to wake up to it. Who are those people anyway? Who appointed them, God over America, so to speak? It's like, where'd they come from? They just showed up one day and there they are. Well, yeah, we see them all over the place. If you're looking for them, you'll see them. They're there.
That is so interesting. I would have never, I don't know. I just think I just pick up things from body language, and I always, he always seemed to be poised with something, with some expression, and it was pretty stoic. But I'm like, well, something there, but I don't know what.
Just don't forget to wash your hands, okay? How many times have you heard Dr. Burks? Now you need to wash your hands, every time. Okay, fine, whatever. But these people have really taken America for a ride, and the rest of the world's in the same boat too. The World Bank just came out today with an article. Of course, they're complicit in this whole thing because they're pushing for sustainable development. But they came out with an article today and said that the world is in economic collapse, the likes of which has not been seen for 150 years.
And we're ready for a great reset.
And they're going to pull. They say, we're going to do a big reset. Okay, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Oh.
I hear that before.
Autumn, visit the World Economic Forum and read what they have there, and you will begin to see what's going on. And any of your audience members.
World Economic Forum.
Mm-hmm. World Economic Forum. The front page right now, it's all about the Great Reset.
Is that a website? Is it .com or okay, .com there?
You'll find it. You just put World Economic Forum and you'll find it.
Yeah. So once again, I really, really appreciate you guys for coming on, and this was more than informational, and I anticipated that it would be. But what I'm going to do right now, I will go ahead and at least drop the Citizens for Free Speech link into the stream so that everyone can take their time and go over at their leisure. And I think we have a long road ahead, and we the people have to start fighting back with what we have, using our resources.
Amen.
That's it. Thanks, Autumn.
Thank you guys so much. And I also want to thank everybody else for tuning in to this segment of Black Spring with Autumn. And I hope to see you guys again soon. And also, I'm going to drop the link in the stream again. so that you can take a look at Citizens for Free Speech. And thank you so much again to Mary Baker and Patrick Wood. Thank you so much.
Fairly welcome.